My name is Evelyn Caldwell, and I was 28 years old when everything began to change. I grew up knowing one thing. Caldwell Energy wasn't just a company, it was my father's empire. Richard Caldwell had built it from nothing, turning a single oil rig in Texas into one of Houston's most powerful corporations. To him, the company wasn't just business. It was his pride, his blood, his identity. And he always made it clear who was destined to inherit it. My older brother, Nathan. Nathan was the golden son, groomed from childhood, praised for every little accomplishment, and ushered into the company with a cushy executive title fresh out of business school. No experience needed. No questions asked. Me? I had to claw my way in. Even after earning 2 degrees and starting at the very bottom, my father dismissed me. "You can join if you want, Evelyn," he had said years ago, leaning back in his leather chair. "But don't expect any handouts. You'll have to prove you belong here." I didn't flinch. Fine, I thought. Then I'll prove it. Office building learning the hard way. At 22, I stepped into Caldwell Energy's glass tower in downtown Houston, starting in the operations division. While Nathan sipped whiskey with board members, I was buried in reports, shadowing managers, and touring noisy refineries. I stayed late most nights, reading market analyses until my eyes blurred. And the more I learned, the more I saw what no one else seemed willing to admit. Caldwell Energy was falling behind. Our infrastructure was aging. Our processes outdated. And worst of all, we were ignoring the one shift no oil giant could afford to dismiss, the rise of renewables. I brought it up once during a strategy meeting. "We should consider investing in renewable energy," I said, steady but nervous. "Solar, wind, even hybrid projects. If we don't pivot now, we'll be left behind." The room fell silent. Then Nathan leaned back with a smug grin. "Renewables? This is an oil and gas company, Evelyn. You can't just slap a solar panel on a refinery and call it a business strategy." Laughter rippled across the table. My cheeks burned, but I refused to look away. "I'm not saying we abandon oil," I replied firmly. "I'm saying the market is shifting. And if we don't adapt, we risk everything." My father's face gave nothing away. He simply ended the meeting and moved on. But that evening, an email from him landed in my inbox. "Prepare a detailed report on renewable trends. Deliver it by the end of the month." It wasn't much, but for me, it was a crack in the wall. Bookmark tabs, the first breakthrough. For weeks, I poured myself into that report, researching data, interviewing experts, building projections. When I finally handed it to him, my hands trembled. "This is thorough," he said, flipping through the pages, his brow furrowed. "I'll review it." That was all. No praise, no acknowledgement. But weeks later, during a board meeting, I heard him quoting parts of my research, without giving me credit, of course. Still, it was proof. My ideas weren't just noise. They had weight. Hourglass not done 6 years of battle. The years that followed tested me more than I could have imagined. Every promotion I earned was a war. Every step forward, a fight. By 25, I was managing small projects. By 28, I had risen to a senior role in operations, close enough to see the top, but always kept at arm's length. Nathan, meanwhile, breezed through titles he didn't deserve, making reckless decisions and brushing off responsibility. My father either didn't see it or refused to. But the cracks in Nathan's leadership were spreading, and the company's future was on unstable ground. High voltage, the spark. It all came to a head in the conference room that day. I had spent weeks building a proposal to overhaul our refineries while laying the foundation for renewables. It was bold, risky, but necessary. When I finished presenting, the room was thick with tension. My father sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Nathan looked ready to explode. "This is ridiculous." Nathan snapped, slamming his palm on the table. "You can't seriously consider her plan over mine." I held my ground. "It's not about me or you, Nathan. It's about what makes sense for Caldwell Energy. If we don't pivot now, we'll be left behind." My father leaned forward, his voice like steel. "And you think you know better than the rest of us, Evelyn? Better than me?" My chest tightened, but I remembered every late night, every ignored idea, every moment I'd fought to be here. I wasn't that uncertain 22-year-old anymore. Yes, I said firmly, meeting his gaze. In this case, I do. The room went silent. And that's when everything began to change. The following week at Caldwell Energy headquarters, the atmosphere was unusually tense. Rumors spread quickly. Richard Caldwell was considering stepping back, and everyone knew what that meant. Nathan strutted through the office halls like a king in waiting, shaking hands, laughing loudly, charming directors and department heads. Evelyn noticed how easily people gravitated toward him. It wasn't just his charisma, it was the assumption that he was destined to take over. She, on the other hand, felt invisible. At the morning strategy meeting, Nathan presented a glossy slide deck on technological expansion. He spoke about automation, digital rigs, and faster drilling operations. Evelyn listened carefully, jotting notes. When her turn came, she stood tall. "I'd like to present an alternative strategy," she said. "One that doesn't just look at next year, but the next decade." She clicked her remote, and graphs lit the screen: global energy trends, investments in renewables, rising demand for sustainable solutions. If Caldwell Energy adapts now, we can lead the transition instead of being crushed by it. A murmur filled the room. Some directors frowned, others whispered. One man cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Miss Caldwell, renewable energy is risky. Expensive. Not what our investors expect." Before Evelyn could respond, Nathan leaned back with a smug grin. "See? I told you, Evelyn. This company doesn't run on idealism. It runs on oil." A few chuckles followed. Evelyn clenched her jaw, but forced herself to stay composed. She wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. That afternoon, she found herself in the quiet company cafe, staring at her untouched coffee. A warm voice interrupted her thoughts. "Don't let them scare you, dear." Evelyn looked up. Standing before her was Margaret Hayes, Caldwell's Senior Vice President of Operations. Margaret was in her early 60s, with silver hair swept elegantly into a bun and a reputation for being both sharp and fair. She had joined Caldwell Energy decades ago, when women in executive positions were rare. "Miss Hayes," Evelyn said quickly, rising out of respect. Sit. Margaret waved her hand with a smile. "I've been watching you. You remind me of myself when I first joined this company." Evelyn blinked. You do?" Margaret chuckled. "Oh yes. Young, ambitious, full of ideas, and ignored by men who thought they knew better. You're not alone in this fight." Evelyn felt something shift in her chest, a flicker of hope. "But how do I convince them? They don't take me seriously." Margaret leaned in, lowering her voice. "You don't convince them with words alone. You convince them with results. Gather your data, build alliances, and when the moment comes, strike where they least expect it." That evening, Evelyn stayed late at the office. The building was quiet, the city lights glittering beyond the glass walls. Daniel walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You're still here?" he asked. "I can't afford not to be," Evelyn replied, flipping through reports. "If I want to make my case, I need more than ideas. I need numbers that even Nathan can't laugh at." Daniel set a cup beside her. "Then you're on the right track. I'll help. I've got access to the field reports on efficiency and cost-saving models. If you can link renewables to profitability, the board will have to listen." Evelyn looked at him, grateful. "Why are you helping me?" Daniel shrugged lightly. "Because I believe in what you're trying to do. And because," he hesitated, then smiled faintly, "this company could use a leader who actually sees the future." For the first time in days, Evelyn felt her resolve harden into something stronger. She wasn't just fighting against her brother's arrogance or the board's prejudice. She was fighting for something bigger, a vision that mattered. And with allies like Margaret and Daniel at her side, she wasn't fighting alone anymore. The weeks that followed were a test of endurance. Evelyn spent late nights poring over data, cross-checking reports, and building a business case for renewable integration. With Daniel's help, She compiled a model showing how solar farms and wind projects could offset costs while attracting new investors. For the first time, she felt momentum. But Nathan was watching. Man in suit levitating sabotage. During a high-level board presentation, Evelyn walked in with her files neatly prepared. She was confident, ready to prove she belonged. But when she opened her binder, her stomach dropped. Several key charts were missing. Whole pages had been swapped out with outdated numbers that made her projections look sloppy. Whispers spread across the table. Unprofessional. Didn't she double-check her work? Nathan smirked from across the room. Tough break, sis. Maybe next time triple-check before presenting. Her father's frown was the hardest blow. Richard Caldwell's disappointment was sharp, though he said nothing. The silence was worse than words. Evelyn barely held herself together until she reached her office. Shutting the door, she pressed her palms against the desk, fighting back tears. She knew Nathan had set her up, but she had no proof. And in the world of corporate politics, accusations without evidence meant nothing. Rose the mentor's lesson. That evening, Margaret Hayes found her alone in the darkened office. "You look like I did after my first board ambush," Margaret said gently, placing a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn's voice cracked. "He's tearing me apart piece by piece. I can't win against Nathan. He's already won." Margaret shook her head firmly. "No. He only wins if you give up. Let me tell you something, Evelyn. This company has always underestimated women. They'll test you harder, break you harder. But if you rise again, stronger, smarter, they can never ignore you." Evelyn swallowed hard, her tears drying into resolve. "Then I'll rise again." Wrench an unexpected ally. The next day, Daniel found her buried in work. "I heard what happened," he said softly. "Word travels fast," Evelyn muttered without looking up. Daniel leaned against her desk. "Then let's make sure the next word they hear is about your success. I've got data from our South Texas operations, real efficiency numbers from hybrid systems we've been testing. With those, you'll have proof Nathan can't tamper with." Evelyn's head shot up. "Hybrid systems? You mean oil rigs partially powered by solar grids?" Daniel grinned. "Exactly. We've been running small-scale pilots. Quietly. The results are good. If you build your case on this, it'll be bulletproof." For the first time since the sabotage, Evelyn felt the fire inside her spark back to life. Cloud with lightning the storm before the breakthrough. 2 weeks later, Richard Caldwell called another strategy session. Evelyn knew it was her chance. Maybe her last one. Nathan was polished as always, throwing around big promises and flashy projections. But when Evelyn stood, the air shifted. She spoke calmly, with quiet conviction. "This isn't just about oil. It's about tomorrow. Caldwell Energy can be the leader in both oil and renewables. And I have the numbers to prove it." She clicked her slides. The room filled with hard data, efficiency graphs, reduced costs, investor interest in clean projects. The South Texas hybrid pilot results glowed on the screen. For the first time, the directors leaned in instead of looking away. Questions followed, real questions, not dismissals. Evelyn answered each one with confidence, her voice steady. Nathan tried to interrupt, but Richard silenced him with a raised hand. By the time she finished, the boardroom was quiet. Not dismissive, thoughtful. Margaret's small smile across the table told her everything. Evelyn had just earned their attention. That night, standing on her balcony overlooking Houston's glowing skyline, Evelyn finally allowed herself a breath of relief. She wasn't at the finish line yet, but for the first time, she felt like she was in the race. And she wasn't going to stop running. The Caldwell Energy annual shareholders meeting was the most important event of the year. Hundreds of investors, analysts, and media outlets filled the grand ballroom of the Caldwell Tower. This year, however, the anticipation was electric because Richard Caldwell was expected to announce his successor. Backstage, Nathan adjusted his tie, grinning at Evelyn. "Don't take it too hard, sis. You gave it a good try. But we both know how this ends." Evelyn met his gaze, calm but steady. "You're right, Nathan. We do know how this ends. Just not the way you think." Bar chart the showdown. On stage, Richard Caldwell opened the meeting with his usual authority. This company was built on hard work, grit, and vision. Today, it must look to the future. And so, we must decide who will carry Caldwell Energy forward. Nathan stepped up first, delivering a smooth, polished speech about efficiency, automation, and expansion of oil operations. He played to the crowd, charming and confident. The room responded with nods and polite applause. Then it was Evelyn's turn. She walked to the podium, her heart pounding but her voice steady. Caldwell Energy has always been a symbol of strength. But strength is not stubbornness. It is adaptability. The world is changing, and so must we. Oil built this company, but it cannot carry us forever. We must lead in renewables or we will fall behind. She unveiled her slides. The South Texas Hybrid Project, investor interest, profitability forecasts. The numbers were undeniable. Then she paused, her tone softening. My father built this company for the future. I intend to honor that legacy, not by clinging to the past, but by carrying it into tomorrow. For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Then, one by one, applause began, first hesitant, then louder, until it rolled like thunder. Crown the decision. Richard Caldwell stood, his expression unreadable. He looked at Nathan, confident, restless. Then at Evelyn, calm, resolute, visionary. Finally, he spoke. I built this company with my own hands. And I've learned that success doesn't come from arrogance or comfort. It comes from seeing the storm before it hits and building strong enough to withstand it. Evelyn has shown me she carries that vision. Gasps spread through the hall. Nathan's face fell, his fists tightening at his sides. Richard placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. From this day forward, Evelyn Caldwell will serve as Chief Executive Officer of Caldwell Energy. The applause was deafening. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. Evelyn stood tall, her eyes shining, not just with triumph, but with the weight of responsibility. Rose Epilogue, A New Dawn. That night, the Caldwell Tower glowed brighter than ever. Evelyn stood in her new office, the Houston skyline stretching endlessly before her. Margaret Hayes stopped by with a warm smile. You did it, Evelyn. You've earned this. Daniel entered soon after, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. To the future, he said, raising his glass. Evelyn clinked hers against his. To the future, and to proving that Caldwell Energy can be more than just oil. As the city lights shimmered, Evelyn felt the legacy of her family settle on her shoulders. But this time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like destiny.